Oh howdy y'all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. When patch 3.22 was announced, one of the first keystones that was mentioned was Extreme Archaeology. This is definitely a very interesting keystone, and it turns out that it plays pretty well as well. Extreme Archaeology transforms the way that Expedition works so that instead of using a series of little blobs of dynamite, you are using one giant nuke. This increases the radius of your explosives by 200%, so instead of being a corner of the screen, they instead hit more than the entire screen. And it also gives you a bit more agency over where this big nuke is placed, but you only get one of them. Additionally, enemies spawn with a bit less life than usual. This is mostly a flavor thing because you've just set off such a massive nuke, but it does mean that if you've got any sort of corpse explosions on your build, then these are going to be made better by this. Now, one thing that's important to note, this applies only to Expedition in-map events. It does not alter logbooks in any way. However, this is really fun. I want to firstly demonstrate what it looks like on a bad map for it. So I've deliberately run a Waterways map. The reason Waterways is a terrible map for this is that you wind up with your expedition encounters often stretched out over a long line. This is exactly what you want to avoid. This is why this layout is terrible for this mechanic. Now you can read every remnant and make a strategic decision as to exactly where you want to set off your nuke, but I generally prefer to go a little bit faster and accept that I'm going to forfeit a little bit of the maximum potential possible loot in order to get things done quicker and get onto the next map faster. If you want to go with my approach, what you do is just use the minimap to navigate to a reasonably large cluster of remnants and set up the nuke somewhere around there. Then, very important, hover over this skull. This skull will tell you what all of the mods are. I could not care less about monsters being immune to physical damage, but your build might be completely unable to do anything with it. Now there are mods that show up in yellow, and that's because they brick a large percentage of builds, but there are a small number of mods that will brick other builds that do not show up in yellow, and the most significant one is 100% ailment avoidance. If the monsters have 100% ailment avoidance, then various builds just flat out won't work. Also, very important warning, if you get a Soul Eater monster in here, you're in for a really wild ride. Those things are terrifying and you might just want to run away from it. So, we set off our nuke in this bad map, and we spawn a whole lot of monsters. Immediately you can see I'm in quite a bit of trouble there. That is normal. You might want to run away after setting off your nuke, because you know that you're going to be in a lot of trouble. I have chieftain defenses, so I'm not going to even try and bother dodging those specific explosions there from those monsters. They're not going to hurt me. Now, we've gotten moderately lucky in terms of just getting more drops than you would normally expect there, but that was a pretty disappointing expedition. Like I said, this is not a good tile set for it. What I'm going to do is then come back with one that's set off in a good tile set. The best tile set I've found so far, surprisingly, is Museum, although I'm still exploring others. Museum tends to have the expedition encounter at the end of a dead end, which ends up working out really well because you can hit a very large percentage of it with the nuke. Okay, this time we have one in a museum map. You'll notice here that on the minimap everything is clustered together pretty tightly. It is usually my experience that museum map tends to have them in 3 rooms. This is the reason that I like them, and they're usually in an L shape to each other because of the topography of this map. No guarantee that this is the best map in the game for this mechanic, it just seems like a pretty good one so far. So, what we're going to do is set up the nuke and have a look here at what we've got. Chaos immunity, don't care. We do have bleed and haste mods which are pretty sketchy, but we can manage that, and usually I wouldn't go into extreme detail in looking at these because I'm playing in softcore and, well, the odd death is just going to happen with a mechanic as rippy as this. So as usual, we're going to set everything up and detonate the explosives, but this time we're going to run away because this is a much scarier setup than we had last time. We have more remnants in total, and so we want to try and be on the outside fighting off these monsters. Now, we'll just try and propagate some kills through here. Searing Bond is doing most of the work, but I also have various explosion mechanics that then cause ignite proliferation through the entire encounter. You'll see there that I took a really nasty bleed, and being outright immune to bleed is a really good spot to be here. If you're in a spot where you can get yourself a ring that has immunity to bleed as a Val implicit corruption, that is a fantastic, fantastic thing. Alternately, there is a mastery that you can use in armor and evasion. So that is a cluster that is boosting both armor and evasion. If your helmet is set up appropriately, then you can render yourself completely immune to regular bleed via that method. Corrupting blood, not so bad here. It is traditional bleed that's the sketchy one. We're just waiting until we can get the big Infernal Cry off, and that should deal with most of the trash. And now we're on cleanup mode. Now the terrifying thing that will happen is sometimes you get a monster with Soul Eater. If that happens, you probably want to lure that thing away. and then kill off all the rest of the monsters there, and just accept that the Soul Eater isn't going to die. I'm sure there'll be the odd person who does have a character powerful enough to get them down, but usually it is not going to be worth your time. And that is the Expedition Nuke. We didn't get much in the way of loot in this one, but that's just a matter of luck. Roll the dice enough times and you will find that you get decent stuff with this. I'm going to explore further into different maps that you can run this on. I feel like Shore could be pretty good, and that's something I definitely want to test. The reason I think that that's going to be the case is that Shore has a very good new divination card now, and on top of that, Shore has no narrow corridors that the expedition can get clustered into. But so far, Museum seems to be the best that I've found. I will let you know if I find anything better. May your Varlorbs, your Expedition Nukes, and your Rogcrafts have interesting results.